Okay, now we have HTTP, which powers the you can say internet, I would say, and HTTP is going to play more important role going forward. Basically, with HTTP, most of the today's I would say microservices architecture are powered by HTTP based standards. So HTTP, I would say, is one of the most important protocol that we use these days. So HTTP stands for Hypertext Transfer Protocol, and it is a fundamental protocol for transmitting data over internet. So the purpose is how messages are formatted and transmitted. So HTTP basically defines the you can say details in what how the messages should be formatted and transmitted between web browsers and servers. It is a client server model. Your web browser is your client and the server is the web server where it is getting the response from. So your client, that is your web browser, will perform a request and your uh, server will provide a response. It is stateless protocol, which means uh, the protocol would not know what happened before. So it does not retain any information from the previous request. So every time you have to make a request, it would be a new one, and it would be considered as a new request, and it would provide the response accordingly. It is a text-based. You can read all the messages in for HTTP. Works on port 80, and HTTP over SSL and TLS, that is HTTPS, works on port 443. So these port numbers are pretty important. I will give you a list of port numbers that can come in terms of different services. And these are the versions for HTTP 1.1, 2 is the predominant, HTTP 3 is the newest one, which has certain edit functionality. And as I mentioned, HTTPS is a secure version which works on usually SSL and TLS for data protection. Now there are certain methods like get, post, put, and delete, and these are pretty important that you should understand. And then the status codes. So if we talk about HTTP methods, so think of methods as how we are trying to request some information from the server. So these are also called HTTP verbs. And for example, get is basically retrieving some information. For example, if I have to load the website, I would the browser will send a request get xyz.com, right? Then you have post, where suppose there is a form submission. So think of it reading a page, and if you have a form submission, it would mostly be using post. Then you have put, which is basically to update an existing resource. You have delete, removes the specified resource. Patch, which is partially modifies an existing resource. Head, it is similar to get, but it only retrieves headers, not the body. So it is mostly used for you can say testing, and in terms of your browser doing some sort of you can say web console, so that you can see what are the information provided. And then you have options, which are used to return information about the available communication options. And trace, this is to perform a loopback test. And then connect, this is to establish a tunnel of the server. Of all these, the get, post, and put, these three are the pretty important one. So keep in mind, get is always generally it can be also used to submit form, but get is generally used for reading, and post is used to submit a form. And once you send this request, the server provides with some sort of response, and these response are mostly provided with a status code. For example, 1xx, which is in the category of informational, 2xx is success, 3xx is redirection, 4xx is client error, and 5xx is server error. So 200 is okay. If the website is found, you will get a 200 okay. 301 means there is a redirect. For example, you go to xyz.com, you can send it to www.xyz.com. So what would happen if browser asks for xyz.com, server can redirect with a 301 to www.xyz.com. If there is no page is not found, it will say 404. 500 is internal server error. So keep in mind there might be something related to 500, 404, and 301 in the exam. So you should be aware of these status code which I've highlighted, and you should have a fair bit of idea of what type of status codes are there in HTTP. Any questions till now?
I'm not from the development background, so how much important to know all these terms for AWS exam?
So you should have fair bit of idea. I mean, it's pretty important to understand everything, how these work, but you should know what these are.
Okay.
So you should, I mean, nobody would ask you to code any website related thing, but you should know, okay, there is a HTTP request and there might be a response which is 200, okay, or there might be a response 404 in case it is not found. So that's it. Because
Okay.
in one or two question, there might be something related to there is an internal server error or there is a 500 response. What can we do? So these kind of scenarios can come.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. So the next is a pretty important thing, a cookie, which is a small piece of data stored on your user computer by website. So suppose you are shopping something and you have put something in the cart. What happens, if you close the browser and come again, you might see that the cart has the same product that you have shopped around. So that information is actually stored in a cookie. So it is stored as a text file on user device, and there are two type of cookies: session cookies and persistent cookies. So session cookies is basically when you close the browser, these are deleted. Persistent cookies remain for the device for a set period. For example, if you log into your Gmail, right, and you close the browser and then you log in again, you are still logged into your account. That is basically because of a persistent cookies, and you can set how much the time period, how long you have to store that persistent cookie on your browser. It is used for remembering login information, user preferences, tracking user behavior, and managing shopping carts in e-commerce. So cookie stealing is a pretty important term. So cookie stealing is basically if you try to steal a cookie from someone's laptop, you would be able to emulate their session. So that's why, in terms of security, cookie is not a very good practice, but it is essential because the newer formats that are provided in Web3 are still not used a lot across the market. Okay, so let's understand how an HTTP request works. So we have a client like web browser. For example, you can use Firefox, Chrome, anything else. And we have web server, which can be Nginx or Apache. So there would be an HTTP request, and that request can be either GET, POST, etc. And you can actually check on your browser these details. So if you go to your browser and go to developer options, you can see what is the type of request being sent. So if you go to the headers part, you can see this is a GET request, and then what is the you can say address that has been resolved from the DNS. So then server will do its operation, whatever logic there it is. It will fetch the HTML file from the disk, or it will load the data from the database, depending on it's a static web or a dynamic web. Then the server will provide a response, HTTP response, and in case it has found, it would provide a 200 OK. Like for example, here, this is a 200 OK. It will also provide the version that it supports, and then it will provide some other details like what are the, you can say, other details in terms of this response. So this is how an HTTP request works. As I mentioned, you should be aware of the status codes and then the various request types.